A little bit of history to start off with. Mentioning the fact that really 305, the year 305, Diocletian decides to go into retirement. Diocletian wants to grow cabbages.
What?
Cabbages. That's what he does. In retirement, he grows cabbages. Right? Ornamental cabbages, cabbages to eat. That's what he wants to do. It's thought that this is a portrait of Diocletian because it was found at Split, Spalato, where his palace was, but we don't actually know for certain. Of course, it doesn't look like anything like the coins. He doesn't even have a beard, but it could be Diocletian. Now, obviously, what he hoped was that everything would work out nice. The Tetrarchy was designed to allow the empire to be controlled by 4 co-rulers, 2 emperors and 2 Caesars, and that logically, of course, once an emperor died or retired, then his Caesar would take over. But it didn't work out like that. In 305, Constantius Chlorus died. His Caesar was called Severus II, but the Roman army in the west declared the son of Constantius Chlorus to be the new emperor, Constantine. Severus is in Rome, and he's not too happy about this. Maxentius, who's the son of Maximianus, decides, well, if Constantine can be emperor, I can be emperor too. My dad used to be emperor. So Maxentius gets an army together, rebels against Severus, and Severus is killed. Maximianus had been made to retire by Diocletian in 305, but he's not very happy about this, so he says, I want to be emperor again. Please let me be emperor again. Meanwhile, over in the east, of course, Galerius has taken over from Diocletian. Well, Maximianus first of all makes the mistake of trying to get rid of his son. And when his son finds out about this, Maximianus leaves Rome and Italy and goes to Constantine and says, I'll support you, Constantine. Constantine says, well, that's good, right, okay. Constantine has got control of Spain and France and Britain. Diocletian comes out of retirement to try and sort out the problems. And it's agreed that Constantine will be ruler of Gaul, Spain and Britain. Maxentius will be ruler of Italy, the Central European provinces, and Africa. Galerius has got the east. Well, Maximianus is not too happy about this, so he tries to rebel against Constantine. Gets no support. Constantine says, right, here is a very sharp knife. Here is a room. In you go. I'm going to lock the door. I don't expect you to come out alive. Ah, that's the end of him. Everybody's happy. Galerius dies, naturally, and is succeeded by another emperor called Licinius. Maxentius starts a war against Licinius, doesn't do terribly well. Decides instead to fight Constantine. And this is where everything starts going wrong. But before then, I'll just go on this. Before then, everything starts, we have to just look at what's going on in Rome. Well, there's been hardly any real dramatic architecture in Rome for many years. We've got the Baths of Diocletian, but what Maxentius decides to do is to stamp his authority on Rome. He wants to make his mark on Rome. Rome at this point really is not the capital anymore. The capital is Milan, or Trier, or Nicomedia, or Sirmium, or Antioch. It's anywhere where the emperor is. Maxentius decides to change this around by making Rome important again. And what he does is just starts to build a new, we think it was probably a law court, but it may have actually been an audience hall, like the big building, the Basilica at Trier, for Constantius Chlorus. So he arranges for the demolition of a market that existed here and builds this, the Basilica Nova. The Basilica Nova is a basilica of, in many ways, a standard plan, except for the fact it's really big. You've got an entrance area here, 3 doorways going into a nave, and 2 what look like aisles, but they're not actually aisles when all is said and done. But this building covers an area of 100 by 65 metres. The nave is 80 by 25 metres. So you've got a 4,000 square metre floor, and the roof is 30 metres above ground level, at least 30, 35. But more importantly, in a standard basilica, you've got columns here to support the roof. Rows of columns, but that's not what we've got on this particular basilica. Instead, we've got these enormous brick and concrete openings like this. Now, this is what survives at the Basilica Nova. It's one of the biggest monuments you can see anywhere in Rome, in the Roman Forum. That's the original entrance coming in from the side of the Flavian Amphitheatre. 3 doorways there, coming into this enormous nave with these big bays on either side, and you can see the beginnings of the cross vaults. Now think back to the cross vaults of Trajan. These are the earliest, in many ways, true cross vaults we've got. Bit by bit, you see the cross vaults becoming a super piece of architecture. In the Basilica Nova, there were columns, but the columns don't do anything. They're just for show. Instead, what you've got is this enormous cross-vaulted ceiling, something like 35 metres above the ground level. And we've only got one half of the Basilica Nova surviving, but you can get some idea of just how big it is from this particular lot here. Work starts on the Basilica Nova in 308. But in 311, Maxentius makes the mistake of declaring war against Constantine. Well, Constantine decides to march an army into Italy. Maxentius is going to wait inside Rome. The Aurelian War. He thinks he can be perfectly safe inside Rome thanks to that. But the people of Rome laugh at him and say he's a coward. Go on, go out and fight Constantine. Go on, off you go. So he does. And at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, just outside Rome in 312, Maxentius is defeated. Most of his army actually die trying to get back across the River Tiber or trying to get over the bridge. Whoa, look at that bright red. Oh, I like it. Better than my shirt colour, that one. Anyway, see, it's made me start going backwards now. No, I didn't start going backwards. I didn't start going backwards because this building has not been finished, the building of the Basilica Nova. So what? Am I going backwards or forward? Where am I going? Oh, here we are. Yeah, right. It's been 14 weeks. Come on, we're all tired by now. When Constantine arrives in Rome, they find the Basilica Nova is still not quite finished. So he decides to make his mark on Rome by changing the plan. What he does is he makes the entrance on one of the long sides, actually on the south side. The original entrance is over here, and he adds an apse on that particular side. So it now becomes a much more magnificent building. Under Maxentius, somebody coming in this way probably would have seen a statue of the emperor right at the very end of the nave. But now anybody coming in this way will see over there an enormous statue surrounded by statues of other emperors. We've got a cutaway view of it here, so you've got some idea of what it would have looked like. This is a bit of a mixed diagram because there is some uncertainty about exactly where this statue was. Some people think it's there, some people think it's there. It doesn't make much sense having it there under Constantine because that's the way you come in. But in that apse, in one of those two apses, was this. This is a 10.9 metre high seated figure. You've got the scale there. An average human being. The head alone is 2.4 metres high. This statue would have been a composite statue. Metal and wood framework, covered with cloth, with the visible parts of the body made of stone, as you can see here, the head of Constantine on the top. The basic idea for the statue, of course, is the Olympian Zeus, made in the classical Greek period. But there are some differences, particular in particular the way Constantine has his finger pointed up like that towards the heavens, in the way he's got the globe there as well. But there's also this rather unnerving sort of impression in his face, which we'll come onto in a moment. Now this is the head, 2 a bit meters tall here. You can see the hand pointing up to heavens. How all this fitted together, nobody really quite knows, to be quite honest with you. But you can see his arm there, heavily muscular arm. But it brings in a completely new style of imperial portraiture. Constantine seems to start his reign with a small beard, but he gets rid of it. So he's the first emperor, apart from Severus and Alexander and the other young emperors, not to have a beard, which means that the artist can really emphasize his jawline. There's also an interesting way in which the pupils are shown. They look like a bean. Now, not one of those magic beans you can buy in the shops for vast sums of money, which my son's like, but it looks like a kidney bean. This seems to be an art style that's coming more and more into fashion in this period. And we see this repeated sort of severe expression in the face. He doesn't look totally and utterly worried all the time. Well, going back to this one, which one's which, that is pretty certainly Constantine. This may be Constantius' son. There's a lot of argument. But these are more than life-size heads. The eyes are always looking up, like that, seeking divine help, seeking divine inspiration, something like that. But you get the picture of this being the dominus. This is the Lord. This is not the princeps anymore. This is much more of an absolute ruler. Well, in 313, what we find happening is Constantine, having captured Rome, then makes a very, very important decision, which is to make Christianity a legal religion. Up to this point, Christianity was considered a subsect of Judaism. It wasn't recognized as being separate from Judaism until the time of Nero, when it became more and more obviously a separate religion. And by the time of Trajan, it's definitely a separate religion, but it's an illegal religion. Basically because the Christians were not prepared to make a sacrifice to the emperor. That implied accepting the emperor as a god. Well, most of the emperors didn't bother too much about this. They just let the Christians go on their way. Periodically, of course, particularly in the 3rd century, the Christians were persecuted for their beliefs, for not accepting the semi-divinity, as it were, of the emperor. Diocletian starts the great persecution for one. But what Constantine does, now Constantine's mother is a Christian, St. Helena. And St. Helena is somebody very important to all archaeologists, because St. Helena is the patron saint of archaeologists. She went out to Jerusalem in the 320s and she did the first excavation in Jerusalem to find out where the crucifixion had taken place. So she's our patron saint in many ways. Constantine believed in the sun god rather than the Christian god. Neoplatonism, which I've talked about before, made this emphasis on there being some kind of supreme being above everybody else. You could see this supreme being as being the sun, life-giving power, not necessarily a god, or you could see the supreme being as being God in a human godlike form. Christians could go along with this quite happily, because if you're just saying the sun is the supreme power, then you're not really getting too upset about it. Yeah, we can all accept the sun is important. But what Constantine does is that when he advanced on Rome in 312, he claimed in later life that he had this vision of the Christian cross appearing in the sky, and he heard the words, "In hoc vince," in this sign you will conquer, you will win. So he then becomes pro-Christian. There's a political reason for this. Politicians will use every means they can to get into power. Rome is not totally Christian, but it's heavily Christianized. the Eastern Roman Empire has got a very large Christian population. Africa is a very Christian area, even though it's still illegal. So what Constantine does is to make Christianity in 313 a legal religion, not the official state religion, not the only religion, a mistake that's often made by people. It doesn't become the only religion until 395, when all other religions are banned. So there you are. Why do we have to know this? I can hear the brain going like that. To understand the Arch of Constantine that little bit better. In 315, Constantine celebrates being emperor, as it were, for 10 years. And the Senate builds an arch to celebrate this. They probably started building it in 312, finished building it in about 315, and it's just here. It's built directly on the turning point of the Triumphal Way, coming from the Circus Maximus up here, turn left, go through the Arch of Titus, along the side of the Roman Forum, and then somehow you go up to the Capitolium there. Here we have the Arch of Constantine. They've got this horrible fence in front of it now, which is really annoying. Here's the Arch of Titus over there, Temple of Venus and Roma. That's the umbilicus, the navel of the Roman Empire. Bonk. That's the point from which all distances were measured in the Roman Empire, and Mussolini destroyed what was left of it so that his soldiers could march quite freely past there. So this is the Arch of Constantine. And what's really fascinating about the Arch of Constantine is, in many ways, the inscription. Must we do an inscription? Yeah. We only have to do the first part. To the Emperor Caesar, Flavius Constantius, that's his proper name, who, with the help, because he was inspired by the divine, he received divine inspiration. God helped him win the victory, but it doesn't say which God. It doesn't say the sun god, doesn't say the sun, doesn't say Sol Invictus, doesn't say the Christian God. See, he's playing his cards carefully. He doesn't want to upset people in Rome too much by being openly Christian, but he wants their support. Otherwise, the Arch of Constantine is fascinating in its form and its style. It's a slightly smaller version than the Arch of Severus. It's 21 meters high, 25 meters wide. You've got the same central opening, two side openings there, decorated with all these relief panels. But as you all know by now, those relief panels come from any number of other monuments. Two panels inside the main arch are from the Great Trajanate Frieze, two panels on either end, the Great Trajanate Frieze, Dacian figures, Trajan's Forum. Two tondi, four tondi on each side, 8 altogether, from a monument of Hadrian's. The panel reliefs of Marcus Aurelius, 8 of those up there as well. Constantinian work is not very much. The spandrels, decoration of the pier bases, and this frieze here. At the end, there are these two Constantinian tondi to help complete the number going around, just like you've got the Hadrianic one, showing on one side the sun rising and on the other side the moon setting. The victories, terrible photograph, a little bit better than what we've seen on the Arch of Severus. They're certainly better than the Decinalia victories. The hunting tondi, the prisoner reliefs that we've got here, rather interesting. You can't actually say what prisoners they are. They're kind of wearing barbarian costume, but they've got short beards and short hair, so they're not exactly Sasanians or Germans or something like that. When we look at the new parts, though, or the old parts and how they've been changed, well, we've already seen how with the panel reliefs of Marcus Aurelius, the heads of Marcus Aurelius, heads of Trajan, the heads of Hadrian, all these have been recarved so that you've got Constantine's appearance. And this attempt at making the hairstyle of, what's his name, can't remember his name now, but also look like 3rd century. But the rest of the reliefs are left with their original style work. The significant part of the arch in many ways is this frieze that goes around here. Because this starts off with the story of Constantine's rise to power. It takes you through the capture of the city of Verona, where he enters Italy, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, and then continues on the other side to tell you what happens afterwards. Well, this is the capture of Verona. It's a detail down there, something up there. A guy in Birmingham wrote his PhD thesis on this, and he was able to demonstrate pretty conclusively that the representations of armour and weapons on this are nothing like accurate. They don't really tie it with what we know from archaeology soldiers were wearing. But I want you to notice the type of carving we've got here. Remember, column of Antoninus Pius, the Decurtio scene, the Praetorian Guardsmen sitting in the centre. They squat. Look at all these. Heads are out of proportion. Bodies are really shrunken in very many ways. Look at this little guy down here. It's nice relief in many ways. It's beautifully, highly carved, but it's very flat at the same time. There's nothing really attractive about it. Well, here we have the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. You can see Constantine's army helped by the gods and people like that. The soldiers of Maxentius being forced off the bridge, forced into the river Tiber. They've all got heavy armour on, so they all die quite happily there. But again, it's all, you know, it's sort of kind of going back to the column of Aurelian. It's going back to, in the long term, Antoninus Pius. It's closest to Septimius Severus's arch. You can see how the art style is really deteriorating in a sense. Then you've got the Adventus, the arrival of Constantine into Rome itself. Well, the edges of the wheels are missing, so it looks like he's being pulled in on a chair. But he's in this remarkably strange chariot. It's like a throne with 4 wheels. It's not really a chariot, but you've got the 4 horses at front, the normal features of a quadriga, a ceremonial chariot. And then on the last side, you've got these scenes from Constantine's arrival in the city. The Oratio, when he talks to the people of Rome. Well, here's Constantine standing on the rostra. And you can see these 2 statues at either end of the rostra. We don't quite know who they represent. But in the background are the 5 columns of the Decinalia that were put up by Diocletian in 303. You can recognize this as being meant to represent Severus's arch. So you've got one slightly bigger arch there above the 2 smaller ones. This is an arch that we know existed on the other side of the Forum, possibly to Tiberius, and this will be the front of the Basilica Julia. So we've got the setting. We know where we are in this one. But again, look at the way everybody is shown. They're sort of rather squat. Senators wearing trabeated togas, ordinary citizens, but we've got sort of women, we've got children included here. In 2 rows, one above the other, we're going right back in many ways to the Vico Magistri relief. I mean, stack them up high like this, but they've learned the lesson, they've not put the legs in for the people in the background. So you get that sense of depth to it. The Donatio scene, where Constantine gives the people of Rome a gift of money, so they all come up to him. Now, Constantine is now wearing a trabeated toga himself here. We don't know exactly where this scene takes place, but we've got the money counters in the background here. They're counting up the money. All the people are coming along saying, "Good old Constantine, give me some money." Good old Constantine. Oh, we're so happy. Woo, we've got lots of money, even though it's not worth very much. But, you know, these are such terrible examples of carving in many ways. Flat, squat, deep use of the drill, like that. No chisel marks, no fine details like that. So not the nicest of work when you think about it. Attractive in its own particular way, particularly the way the sculptors are trying to give that sense of depth by putting people up in levels like this. Notice, of course, there's also the fact that some of these people have beards, some of them don't. If you go by the coin portraits, everybody should be having a beard at this particular time. And here in this fighting scene, it's the same type of flat figures. Well, the Arch of Constantine is a political statement. The Basilica Nova, which is now renamed the Basilica Constantina, is also a political statement. But Constantine starts to transform Roman architecture in a much more significant way. Now remember, he claims that he won the Battle of the Milvian Bridge with the support of the Christian God. He himself kept on showing the god Sol Invictus on his coinage for several years after he became emperor at Rome. He's playing the cards right. He does support Christians. He actually pays for the building of 2 Christian churches at Rome. But where does he build them? Well, one is St. John's Lateran Church, which is built on the Imperial Palace, or in the Imperial Palace grounds on the southwest edge of Rome. The other is St. Peter's Vatican, built over the site of the tomb of St. Peter's tomb, which is built on the Vatican Hill, which is imperial property on the other side of the Tiber. You see, this is where the Circus of Nero is. He doesn't dare to build 2 Christian churches in the centre of Rome. He puts them outside. But St. John Lateran is built in 314, St. Peter's Vatican is built in 316, and stood in perfect condition until some guy called Michelangelo knocked it down to build the modern Vatican Church there, which is really annoying for many of us. However, we can reconstruct it. And what we find with Constantine is he decides on using the Basilica plan for Christian churches. He's not the first to do this. There is a reference in one source to a basilica church or basilica type church existing in Syria before the time of Constantine. So we know that basilica churches go back earlier than Constantine. The basilica church in many ways is the development of the Jewish synagogue of the 2nd and 3rd centuries after Christ, which takes a basilica plan. But the Basilica plan, Constantine decides on using this for St. John Lateran. He decides on using this for St. Peter's in the Vatican. So this now becomes the standard type for early Christian churches. Well, we don't have any surviving really early Basilica churches. Incidentally, the oldest standing Christian building is in Turkey, in Nisibis, with a date on it, 356. It's probably a martyrium. And that's the oldest standing Christian building, and it remained in Christian use, as far as we know, continuously until the 1840s, when it was turned into a military police house, something like that, for a few years. But you can see what these basilica churches look like when we look at, for example, Santa Sabina. Santa Sabina built sometime in the late 4th or 5th century, probably 5th century. And think back to the basilica at Trier, Constantius Chlorus's palace hall, not a church. Think also, of course, of the Basilica Nova. But again, that's not a church. So you've got this typical basilica appearance, typical basilica plan. Brick and concrete used here. This is what it looks like on the inside. The mosaic has unfortunately been redone in the 19th century, but this is what St. Peter's, St. John and the Lateran would have looked like, except for the fact that they've both got double side aisles. There's another very typical Christian plan develops about the same time, and that is the mausoleum. But the mausoleum, in some cases, can become a church. This is the church of Santa Constanza in Rome, which was built as a mausoleum for one of Constantine's daughters. Well, the idea of a circular mausoleum, Galerius, Thessalonica. The idea of a polygonal mausoleum, Diocletian, Split. So you can see how this plan can be usefully adapted as a sort of Christian ritual centre. And that's how the Church of Santa Constanza starts off, almost certainly with the tomb of Constantia, his daughter, in the centre, so people can come in and pay their respects to her. But this introduces a completely new element, which you don't see in any of those earlier mausolea. You've got this very high central rotunda like that, with a row of double pillars going around it like that. It doesn't look particularly impressive from the outside, brick and concrete. We're looking at the narthex, looking towards the actual church here. But when you get inside, it really is an incredibly impressive place. It now has an altar in the centre, which is almost certainly where Constantia's tomb would have been originally. And you can see you've got these double paired columns that go all the way around it. The really remarkable thing, though, is the ambulatory, the walkway that goes around that central area, because the ceiling is decorated with an incredibly elaborate mosaic, which still survives in very good condition. The walls probably had mosaic as well, but we have no evidence for that now. These mosaics, though, are really very remarkable. This is Christian, this is a Christian mausoleum. The basic style of this mosaic comes from Africa. This is an African type mosaic. We can see mosaic patterns like this in Africa in the use in the 2nd century. It's not Roman, it's more African influence. It's a vine scroll, a very elaborate vine scroll with a portrait of a woman in the centre. And you've got these wonderful little scenes around it. You've got a guy who's taken a wine barrel in a cart. We know it's a wine barrel because these guys are treading the grapes to make wine. So you've got this incredible sort of scene which is non-Christian in origin, but it's been adapted for use in Christian symbolism. One of the early Christian popes said to St. Augustine, the guy who was sent out to convert the English, the easiest way to do it is to make them think that the symbols they believe in, the holy places they believe in, are Christian. This is what's happening. Adapting something from the non-Christian world into Christian symbolism. So this could be an African mosaic, floor mosaic for a wealthy farm owner, but it's now come into a Christian semblance. The vine scroll symbolises everlasting life, life after death. The treading of the grapes to make wine, and drinking of the wine, part of the Christian religious ritual. Other scenes, though, don't really have any relationship to Christianity, but they're not specifically non-Christian either. So you've got these beautiful scenes like this, all these wonderful mosaics. Any of these mosaics you would see on a floor in the 2nd or 3rd century. But then we start seeing how, under Constantine, with, for example, the Junius Bassus sarcophagus, which we can date precisely, thanks to the inscription on it, to AD 359, how Christianity is being merged into earlier Roman art styles to take over from earlier arts, the pagan styles. Christianity does not become the single official religion until 395. It's a developing thing. It just becomes harder and harder not to be a Christian. But with the Junius Bassus sarcophagus, a guy who was prefect of Rome, who had been a consul of Rome, we got his name and his career written on this and part of his life inscription. This amazing combination of what looks like an Asiatic sarcophagus, the sort of thing being made in Asia to a certain extent, like the Antakya sarcophagus, with that architectural frieze there, but actually in this case being used to promote Christian symbolism. So for example, from the Old Testament and the New, we have the sacrifice of Isaac on here, where you're unfortunately missing the hand of God, which has come down here. There's Isaac. But everybody, of course, is shown in Roman togas with Roman hairstyles. I mean, this is a Roman piece of work. Isaac down the bottom there. A Christ in majesty scene. Christ, a young Christ, no beard, sitting between probably St. Peter and St. Paul. Christ in majesty in heaven. Scenes from the life of Christ, so the arrest of Christ, the trial of Christ here with that classic episode from the Bible when the Roman judge washes his hands. He doesn't want to be involved in the legal proceedings. The entry of Christ into Jerusalem. The whole sarcophagus is decorated on four sides like this. Adam and Eve, who are next door, literally, dung, 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 to this particular scene, an incredible combination of scenery and image there. This is my favourite. You know the story of Job? The prophet Job? He was the one who said, my belief in God is so strong, nobody can shake me. So God sent him punishment after punishment after punishment. His sons don't speak to him. His wife leaves him. He loses his home. He ends up living on a dunghill, a compost heap. Worms start growing out of his body. But still he believes in God. So he's rewarded by God in the end. There you are, see? Wiping your hands won't get that one away. So what you find in the Junius Bassus sarcophagus is this combination of Christian imagery, Old Testament and New Testament, in what is fundamentally a Roman piece of work, a sarcophagus modelled on an Asiatic sarcophagus. And that's why I always stop at this particular point with dear old Constantine, because after him, there ain't much more you can say. Now, pagan imagery, prima porta statue, the heavens, now being used as Christian imagery. Christ is more powerful than the heaven. So there we are. Right. Quick word about the exams. I'm going to give you a different type of final exam than the midterm exam, so that hopefully you won't have to worry too much. I'll sort out some topics. I'll use probably Wednesday to go through the topics, to put them on the web so you know what you have to study. Okay? It will probably be, I'm not saying it will be like this, but I'll probably come up with about 7 or 8 topics for you to study, 5 or so topics in the exam, because otherwise if I only give you 5 topics, then that's all you'll ever study, and you'll never know anything about Roman art and architecture. Okie dokie. All right. Well, thank you for bearing with me for 14 weeks.